Okay, so TMNT, shall we? As you probably no doubt know, from the fact that a viewer in front of mine sent me pretty much all of the missing seasons in my TMNT original cartoon series set, except for one. Um, you probably know by now that I'm a pretty big Turtles fan, and on this video I am going to announce that I am going to be writing for TeenageMutantNinjaTurtles.com very soon. The site is undergoing a design change, but I have been named as one of the writers for that site. So, yes, I am a pretty big Turtles fan, alright? So, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Ninja Turtles, right? I'm a pretty big Ninja Turtles fan. Of course, there's been this hullabaloo going on with Michael Bay stating his stupid ass, stating that, of course, he's going to change the origin of the Ninja Turtles from mutant to alien, which, red flag right there, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We've already seen this mentioned. I'm just mentioning it again just because it bears mentioning again. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not alien, mutant. One of the people on his message board slyly wrote back, of course, oh, so you're supposing that these aliens aren't going to mutate after they reach Earth? Because, you know, that wouldn't be contrived and ridiculous and pointless. Like an added change that adds nothing to the story. Think about it. If you can find something legitimate that adds to the story, that, you know, it would not take away from other aspects of the story to add something like that to the story, then please tell me. Tell me something it adds without taking something else away. And honestly, I can't even think of anything that it would add. And maybe that's fanboy rage. I'm willing to admit. I'm willing to admit that. But I really can't think of any good thing that this adds to it. This alien aspect, like what could that possibly add? They're from outer space, which means we know nothing of their ways, and they don't really have to care about humanity then, do they? I mean, all the aliens thing does is to give it a completely clean slate so that, you know, we don't actually have to feel anything unless we're being told to feel anything. I think that's what's going on here. I think that's what, well, I hesitate to say just Bay, because, you know, it might not just be him. It's probably more the writers behind it and stuff. But he's the one, he's the figurehead here. He's the one announcing about this. So, for all intents and purposes, as with everyone else on the internet right now, I will just refer to it as Bay's decision. Honestly, because it sounds like something that he would decide and that he would do. And it seems, like I said, like he's, you know, or they are just doing this so that they can have a completely clean slate to work with. And they don't need a clean slate. That's the thing. I mean, what the hell does the alien thing add to anything without completely taking away from, you know, the name of the movie? Now, granted, I mean, I keep thinking about, okay, Teenage Alien Ninja Turtles is what they should do, but they're not going to do that because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a seller. It is marketable. It's a proven seller over the past 25 years, and there's the thing right there. Over the past 25 years, this aspect of the story has continued on, and has not hurt anything. For 25 years, kids were able to watch and believe and have fun with the Ninja Turtles. And well, fans of the comics were, of course, at least the original comics, were given the opportunity to experience something interesting and new and gritty and, hardcore, as it were. But yeah, I mean, this aspect of the story has lasted for 25 years, and yet now they are saying that they're going to change it. Now, let me just, before anybody says anything, before you even start writing that comment, before you even get on my ass about this, all right? It's honestly a good thing that this happened recently after doing that collaboration with you, Sean, because in that collaboration we talked about how, sometimes they have to make a few changes to fit something on the screen, that to take something to adapt it to a different format. Sometimes the original authors are behind those changes. Huge, drastic, dramatic changes. As with The Walking Dead, as I've been learning, reading some of the comics since we did that, they made some pretty drastic changes. But as we said, the original heart and soul is still there. And that's just the kind of changes that they had to make to turn it into a television series. I think it's telling because, well, they have Kirkman working on the television series. And they had him on The Talking Dead for the last episode of the season, and he didn't sound at all disappointed in anything. In fact, he sounded and looked like he was pretty happy with the way things were going. So if the original creator is pretty happy with it, then I wish all of you fanboys would just shut the hell up about it. But here's what I'm saying. That was the way that they chose to adapt that into a television show. When TMNT was adapted to a television show, they took it from being a gritty, grimy, dark comic book aimed at young adults to adults, and they made it a family-friendly, lovable, funny type of thing. But they stayed true for the most part. I mean, there were definitely changes here and there, but for the most part, they stayed true to the origins. They added characters here and there that, honestly, the characters they added actually added to the mythos and the lore, and it was a really great way to add to it and everything. They took the heart and the soul of it and they made it more family friendly, and it took off. So much so that a lot of people out there still don't even know that it was based on a comic book series. When they think of Turtles, they think of the original of this. They think of the original animated series. So there's an example of how changing a few things to fit it to a different format makes sense, and it actually works. But there are just certain things you don't change. That it doesn't make any sense to change. And if it doesn't make sense to change, that whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing, If it's a necessary change, then all right, I'll go with it and everything, But the problem with this whole, concept that this alien thing might be a necessary change is that we have proof that it isn't a necessary change. We have 25 years of proof that it isn't a necessary change. Because for 25 years they have been mutant Ninja Turtles, and now, for whatever reason, off the top of their heads, they're like, well, why don't we just make them aliens now? I understand that in the 80s, mutants were a lot more popular than they are today. But does that mean that if you gave an X-Men project to Michael Bay that he'd say, aliens? Really? Freaking really? X-Men, they're aliens now. I mean, what the freaking hell is that? Come on. It's the same freaking thing. If you took the X-Men and turned them into aliens, it's the same thing as turning TMNT into aliens. It makes no sense. Why would you do that? I understand the mutant thing isn't as popular anymore, but it's not about being as popular anymore. You know, I understand also that you're trying to, bring this to a new crowd, uh, a younger crowd maybe that doesn't know TMNT as well as we do. But again, this isn't a change that's necessary. Now I keep seeing people say, well, sometimes when you bring something to the big screen, you have to make some changes here and there, and like I talked about with you, Sean, the Walking Dead thing. You have to make changes. Even the authors get involved with the changes when going to the big screen. But here's the thing, as I'm sure you are aware, as I'm sure all of my fans are aware, I hope most of them would be aware, there were three successful Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies, live action in the 90s. Three big live action movies in the 90s. Just the mere fact that the movie franchise reached a third film speaks to the popularity of the series, and they didn't change that aspect, the origin aspect of the Ninja Turtles throughout all three of those. Really, they didn't. They didn't do anything like this, and yet it remained popular. In fact, it remained so popular that the freaking cartoon series continued on, and then a second cartoon series spawned from it. It remained popular despite the fact that in the 90s, mutant stuff wasn't really that popular anymore. It wasn't as popular as it was in the 80s and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Mutants weren't the popular thing anymore. Going on into the 90s and the 2000s when the new series came out, and yet it was still a relatively popular show. Which, I mean, if it wasn't still relatively popular then, we wouldn't even be talking about them making another movie right now. I mean, granted, it's a reboot, but Michael Bay would not even be touching this project if the 2000 series wasn't successful enough to keep the series and to keep the Ninja Turtles going on into the next generation. So this whole concept that, well, sometimes you need to change certain things when you bring it to the big screen. Really, they didn't need to change it for the original movies, and they didn't need to change it for everything that followed after the original movies. Why do they have to change it now for this big screen adaptation? That argument holds no weight whatsoever, because the original movies spawned 3 fucking sequels, so they were pretty fucking popular, alright? And they didn't change anything about the origin story for the Turtles in those movies. Nothing! They didn't change them into aliens. They didn't have to change that for those movies to be successful or popular. So, if you're going to use that argument, you need to keep that in mind, that yes, these movies did exist. Yes, they were very freaking popular. Popular enough to spawn 2 sequels to the original movie. So, the argument that you need to change things here and there sometimes for it to fit the big screen, well, it already did fit the big screen in a big freaking way in the 90s, and they didn't change a goddamn thing about the origin story. So, fuck that argument up the ass, because it's bullshit. Another thing that I'm seeing from Michael Bay fans is just this, well, Michael Bay, look what he did with the Transformers series. They say that as if he did something good with the Transformers series, mind you, which I just have to laugh at. Ha! Look what he did with that. Those movies were so popular. They made so much money. I think he knows more about filmmaking than we do. Being able to make money with movies and making good movies are 2 different things completely that have no fucking attachment whatsoever. If you know anything about film history at all, They have no fucking attachment whatsoever. Because if you can name me one good movie that was actually successful, there's like one. Godfather. Fucking Godfather. And maybe Star Wars, but arguably Star Wars isn't exactly high art. It's, the Spielberg blockbuster type thing. It's not exactly the artistic film. Although I love Star Wars, and I consider it a fantastic movie, and just, the original series, I love it, obviously. I'm a geek. But, it's like, when you think of films that could be considered high art, and, definitely great films, no matter who you ask, Godfather, fuck yes. And that, that shocked people. That shocked the film studios. Because that movie was in theaters for like a year. And they couldn't take it out because it just kept making money. Because back in those days, it wasn't like you could go out to the store and get a VHS and, watch it again and again and again. If you wanted to see a movie again, you couldn't buy it later. There was no aftermarket. You just had to say, oh, wow, I like that movie. I liked it enough that I might even go see it again in a few weeks. And that's the way they did things back then. It was a different world. So, keep that in mind when we're talking about films today. It was a completely different world. It was able to work back then, that you could find, and even then it was hard to make it work, but it was able, Francis Ford Coppola was able to make it work so that, there was a really artistically well done film here that gave all audiences something that they wanted, but didn't, bow down to the whims of the lowest base, audience at all times in order to deliver something actually meaningful. I mean, it did deliver something actually meaningful there. Very impressive. Honestly, we haven't seen anything like it since. So I don't know where people are getting this idea that Michael Bay could be considered a artistic filmmaker, or somebody who makes great films and knows more about films than we do. He doesn't know about making films. He knows about making films that make money. He knows about making blockbusters. That's not knowing how to make movies. That's knowing how to market. They're two different things. Just because you can market something doesn't mean you're a good filmmaker. If you look at the stuff he does in his films, it's all cliche. It's all the exact same freaking angles, the exact same cinematography, the exact same music, the exact same jokes, the exact same everything. The exact same formula every single time. What are we talking about with this TMNT thing, all right? What is he doing with it? He's trying to turn TMNT into the same thing that he did with Transformers. Oh, aliens that came from outer space looking for help. I bet you anything. Now, granted, these turtles won't be able to transform into cars or anything like that, but apparently they will be able to transform into turtles. If you get what he's doing there, he's just so clever. This guy is a great filmmaker. He's so good. I mean, look at how much money he made. That is clearly a defining factor in whether a filmmaker is good or not. If they're making money, they're a good filmmaker. Again, we live in a different world. That's no longer the case. It wasn't the case back then, but there was a stronger argument for it then, because you had people like Hitchcock, and you had people like Coppola. But we don't live in that world anymore. We don't live in the film world where a filmmaker can make something that is designed for all audiences and yet is art. The only person that even gets close to that anymore today is Steven Spielberg. And honestly, he is definitely, even though he's got an art to it, and I would call him in a way, and I know a lot of people are going to get upset about this, I would call him an auteur. Even though he is a great filmmaker, he's still basically in it to entertain people. A true filmmaker is, I would argue, is not really concerned with entertaining people, but rather with telling a story in a meaningful way. When you're just concerned with entertaining people and when you're just concerned with making money, you can't really, your art is hampered. I mean, the greatest Greek writers of all time have talked about that ad nauseum. Hundreds of years ago, they discussed the concept that when you're doing something to make money, it's not art. Because you're not doing it out of the goodness of your soul. You're not sharing a piece of yourself um, with only the intention of exploring. And the argument that they made for this was that when it's done for money, you let your hunger, actual hunger, you let your hunger, your greed, and everything like that define what you put out more than you do your soul or anything else meaningful. And it's a powerful argument that still holds true to this day. Because if you're more concerned about money or eating or something like that than you are about the story you're trying to tell, then you're not really producing anything high art. And the only reason I go into detail about this is to bring up the point that no, Michael Bay is not high art. So stop treating him like he's high art just because he makes money on films. He is a fucking sellout, like everyone in Hollywood, okay? I accept the system for what it is. All I'm asking you to do is the same thing. Accept the system for what it is. Accept that Michael Bay, like everyone else in Hollywood, is a freaking sellout. And there's nothing high or elevated about what he does. He makes money making movies, and that's the only thing he's concerned with is marketing and making money. That's why he's doing this, for marketing. He doesn't know how to make movies. This has nothing to do with how talented of an artist he is. He's not an artist. He's a fucking con artist, okay? And I hate to put it that way, but it's like, yeah, he kind of is, because he's hawking shit. He's not delivering anything creative or personal about himself. He's doing what he needs to do to be able to earn a buck, all right? And earning more than a buck, honestly. And the writers that are probably more behind this than he is are probably thinking the same thing. I need to do something to impress Michael Bay so that I can make some money here. So no, just because he makes money does not mean that he knows how to make a good movie. It means that he knows how to market his movies. It means that he knows the base audience that he is selling his movies to. It means that he knows how to entertain. Knowing how to entertain and being an artist are two different things. Now, granted, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles isn't exactly high art. And honestly, I have to say that when I first heard that Michael Bay's production company would be doing TMNT, I was not actually too frustrated by it, because I was under the assumption, number one, that he was not going to have much to do with the project. But I was also not too concerned, because Michael Bay does this kind of stuff good. I mean, if you look at his at the Transformers movies, although they were not at all what the Transformers were supposed to be, one could argue that Michael Bay would have a much easier time producing a more fun-loving, calling back to the original TMNT animated series version of TMNT than he could doing anything Transformers or anything more serious and more action-oriented and stuff like that. And that was my thought at the time, was, well, maybe his piss and fart jokes will actually work well for Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo, and stuff like that. But it just doesn't make any sense to change them to aliens. That it doesn't add anything, and it actually does take quite a bit away. Uh, there's no reason for it. Every argument that has been made for it is complete bullshit. The one of the original creators is involved in the project, so fuck you. Well, just because Michael Bay says that he's working closely with one of the original creators, remember, he's not an artist. He is a con artist. He hawks shit for a living. He is a market. He's marketing the thing. All right. He's in the marketing mode. So he's trying to sell shit. So of course he's going to say that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's talking to this person day in, day out. For all you know, it means that he's talked to this person once in the past 6 months, on a whim for like just a few sentences here or there or something like that, just once, and didn't even mention the changes at all at that point. I mean, he could get away. He's the kind of guy big enough in Hollywood that he could get away with saying that he's working closely with the person and actually not working too closely with the person. But I digress, because I'm just going to assume that he is working closely with the person. I think Jeremy Jahns said it best about this issue. He's working closely with the creators, huh? The same creators that thought it was a great idea to add a 5th female Ninja Turtle. Yeah, that went over really well, guys. Really well. I mean, just because the original creator is working on the project doesn't mean that it's going to be a great idea to change this. I mean, there's something called the intentional fallacy that I believe holds true not only through literature, but through film, because I believe that film is a form of literature in one way or another, even if this is base film for like the lowest audience, which I believe that it could be more than that, but, it's not exactly high art, as I've said. But even then, I believe that the intentional fallacy applies here. Just because the original author says that this is what he intended, or this is what they intended, does not mean that that's what that's the way it should be, or that it's going to work. Basically, I mean, look at what George Lucas has done, saying, well, originally I intended for this, originally I intended for that in the Star Wars films, and as it continues going on, it just keeps making the movies worse and worse and worse because of everything he intended to put in at the last second that he never mentioned before. Yeah. So even though the author isn't the original creator isn't exactly saying that he intended for them to be aliens, just because he may now be getting behind the idea of them being aliens or contributing that, does not mean that it's a good idea. And yeah, you can't just say, well, the author thinks it's a good idea, therefore it's a good idea. That's not how it works. That's not how interpreting literature and films and art works. You can't just say that because this guy said it, then it must be true. No. It's an interpretive form of art. All right? So, yes, we have the right to bitch and complain if we don't think it's going to work. And even if we do think it might work, if we're complaining because it's another example of ain't broke, don't fix it. It doesn't need to be fixed. It worked for 25 years. There is no reason to change this. That's why it pisses me off personally. There is no reason to change this to aliens. Aliens are just as popular today as they were in the 80s when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out. But they were mutants then. Why can't they be mutants now? Is it because mutants aren't as popular anymore? I don't fucking care. It's in the goddamn name of the damn franchise. You can't just change something like that on a whim and then use the exact same name after 25 years of the same formula working every single time out. You're just going to throw it away. Why? There's no reason to. This is like the most pointless change. That's what gets me. But no, apparently I just don't know anything about film or art or anything like that. Michael Bay is just way too, high-minded for me to understand. Bullshit. Fucking bullshit. A 5-year-old can understand Michael Bay. A 5-year-old does understand Michael Bay because 5-year-olds are Michael Bay's main fucking audience. And if you like Michael Bay's shit, chances are you're a 5-year-old inside, and, your interpretation of art is about the level of a fucking first grader. So I'm sorry, but yeah, I just fucking insulted a lot of you. But it's true. If you literally think that Michael Bay's work is of a high enough art that I clearly, and others clearly don't know what they're talking about when they say that this is pointless and adds nothing and is a change that should not be made. He's the filmmaker who makes millions of dollars, so what the hell do we know? Because he's making money, and clearly that says something about his ability to make good films. As I've stressed already enough ad nauseum, that says nothing about his ability to make good films. And now that this video is almost like 30 minutes long, if not longer, I'm just going to end it on that. These are my feelings about Michael Bay's changes to the TMNT formula. And I'm just hoping and praying that the Nickelodeon animated series is not going to do the exact same thing. But the fact that he delivered this at like a Nickelodeon event, I'm sufficiently concerned now, because even though it might not ruin the franchise, it's definitely something that just feels tacked on and completely unnecessary. Like, why? There's no reason for it. And you can't just treat this guy like a golden god, being like, well, my god must have a reason for doing this, and look what he's created thus far. So, he created the world and the heavens. He created everything, and so I have faith in him because I know that he means me well and that he will not let me down. Michael Bay is not a god, right? He is a fucking marketer. He is a hawker. He fucking hawks shit for a living. And he makes a lot of money doing that. And he's great at that. He's fantastic at marketing shit. But creating actual artistic content with any real meaning to it, throw that the fuck out the window. And if you think TMNT doesn't have any meaning to it, get the fuck out of here. That's all I gotta say. Peace.